Everyone, DIY Dad here. Welcome back to my garage and my channel and my Spyders. We have another project to do. We're going to be modifying and removing the Evap canister from this bike, which means we're going to be messing with the emission systems a little bit. And I have to give a bit of a disclaimer. I'm not a mechanic. I don't work for Can Am. I don't work for any state where I can authorize or say that this is a good thing to do. So do your research on this, on whether this is a process that you can go through in your state, that you want to go through, it's going to avoid any warranties or anything else for you. I've already done that research for me, and I know that this one is going to be a hopefully good upgrade and solve a check engine light problem that I have on this particular bike. So if you've already done that and you're sure that you want to go forward, stick around, and I'm going to walk you step by step through how to take apart the pieces of the bike that we need to, remove the canister, route the vents, and do a few other things. So for this project, there's a few things you're going to need. You're going to need a chunk of 1/4-inch fuel line, a coupler, a T30 screwdriver or ratchet, whatever you've got to pull out those screws, a standard screwdriver, 10mm box wrench, and then optionally, I'm going to be installing a inline fuel filter that's intended for a lawnmower, just as a kind of a safety check for the vent line off the fuel tank. A couple hose clamps, random little bolt, nothing really specific about this, about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch long, something we can use to plug the hose that you'll see, then a couple cable ties just to hold everything together. So to get started, you're going to want to go to the passenger side or right-hand side of the bike, and we're going to remove this panel. So you have to unlatch the seat, pop that up, and then it's going to be 4 T30 screws. There's 2 on the front and 2 on the back. And then this panel will kind of pull down and out. So it's got a little tab that hooks up under this piece of bodywork. So you're gonna wanna loosen it, and you should be able to kind of shimmy it and pivot it this way, and it'll pop free. So it's gonna be a little bit difficult to see, but this down here is the Evap canister that we're going to bypass. I may actually leave it in place and just sort of route around it. There are 3 hoses that go into this Evap canister. There's this one, which kicks to your purge valve and goes out to the motor. There's a vent hose, which is the center one right here, which comes up, curls around, and hooks into kind of a vent connection in the gas tank. You can see right down there. So that runs under, hooks up, and down there. And then there's a 3rd connection that's under this kind of corrugated piece of plastic down here, which is just a vent that comes out of the canister and just hooks down to allow air to come in. So essentially the way the system is meant to work is fuel vapors from the gas tank travel down this little vent line, go into the canister, and then a purge valve allows those vapors to be pulled from the canister into the rear bank of the motor and burned off so that they're not being just released into the atmosphere. But due to the way that this thing is designed and some of the kind of quirks of the way this motor works in this bike, the system can be almost a little bit overly aggressive, so gas can actually flow into this vent and flow into the canister, and you get an issue where the purge valve opening while the motor is running can cause essentially a vacuum leak in that rear cylinder and cause the whole system to lean out and throw a check engine light, which is what I have happening right now. Plus this valve can get stuck open, which allows gas to or vapor rather, to flow back and forth. Causes a whole big issue where you get this gas smell coming out of the bike pretty much all the time. So what we're going to do is bypass this whole system. We're going to leave the purge valve in place and connected so it doesn't throw the computer off, but we're going to disconnect it from the canister here and plug this hose, but leave it kind of tucked in. So I'll unbolt it temporarily just to allow us to get it plugged, but then we'll just bolt it back in place. So it's going to sit here and stay as though it was connected. This vent that goes to the fuel tank still has to be there. We still have to allow air to kind of travel back and forth in the fuel tank. But what we're going to do with it is disconnect it from the canister and then put a little T-fitting on it. And we're actually going to run this back through the bodywork and exit it with a little fuel filter right back here. So that's going to allow the vent to still function, but it's going to bypass the Evap canister completely, and that should deal with the issue that we've got. The main thing we need though is to plug this and then routing this will just kind of make it a little bit cleaner for us. So for the actual removal, I like working left to right. So I'm going to remove this line first, and then I'll pull the vent hose for the fuel tank as well. To remove this line, there's a T30 screw here. It does have a bolt on the back that's holding it. It's a 10 millimeters, so you will have to get a wrench and kind of bring it in around the back and hook onto that so you can hold it in place while you loosen that screw. And then the hose clamps that hold this to the canister are this barbed kind of overlap type. So the way that these work, there's 3 little barbs and kind of a strap here. So you'll take a small standard screwdriver, place it into this opening, and you can kind of pry this strap up, and that lets the whole thing release, and then this will pull free. So we'll loosen this screw, pull this out, move this out of the way, and then I'll pull these 2 hose clamps, and we'll end up with 2 fuel line hoses sort of out here. So here are my 2 lines free from the canister. So this is the one going into the motor, this is the vent going into the gas tank. Have a close up on these clamps. I hate these little clamps. They don't come off real easily, and actually they're not very effective. So on mine, I was able to sort of work them loose just a little bit with the screwdriver, and then these just pulled straight off the canister. Like, these didn't actually really hold it in place at all. So if you can't get these to release, just kind of get a little bit of play in this fitting, and then you can just sort of pull this straight off the canister. The other thing that's kind of interesting is this canister, as far as I can tell, isn't actually connected to anything. It's just sort of laying in here. Like, it moves very easily, and I can actually kind of pull it up. So I was gonna leave this in place, but the more I'm looking at it, it's not actually really seeming to be attached. I don't really like leaving something that just free floats in there like that. So I may actually pull this vent hose and see if I can work that out here. The other thing I'll say is, initially at least, unless I have to remove it to get this out of the way, I didn't take this off completely. All I did was loosen it, excuse me, enough that this little canister can pull out, because I didn't want to worry about having to reattach that captive nut later. So if you do loosen it, you can pull this whole thing free. You may not have to actually take this piece off completely. It'll make it a whole lot easier to reinstall on the other side. So for the line running back to the purge valve, you're going to take your bolt, and I've wrapped it just with a little bit of Teflon tape. It's probably overkill, but why not? Slide one of your clamps onto the end here, and then thread this bolt up into this hose, and then clamp it down tight. That's going to plug this and allow us to then thread it back in and have it sit in there plugged, so everything will, well, look okay, but also be sealed up and not have any vacuum issues going back into the motor. So our line is now plugged. That can then be fed back through this little bracket and made to sit down and be snug. Everything will be all secure and tight with that. With the vent from the gas tank then, I've taken the coupler and threaded it in. So I'll put a hose clamp on this, and then I'm gonna take a chunk of my fuel line, thread it onto the other side of this, and then that's gonna run in the bodywork here and come back, and my filter will sit right in here. So I have to take this panel off, or at least loosen it. To do that, what we're gonna do is pull these body clips on the top, so that one and that one, and then we're gonna take out this T30 right here, and I think that'll give me enough clearance that I can kind of pull this down and run this inside without having to take the whole thing off. If we do have to take the whole panel off, there's a couple more screws underneath. There's I think 2 right here, and then there's a couple body clips kind of down here in the corner that we'll have to do. All right, so our plugged line to the intake is all reconnected and secured. I have the coupler installed with my extended fuel line. It did work to just loosen this body. You can see it just kind of pulls down. So what I'm doing is I'm running the fuel line down under the seam on the tank, and then along this little void here, and I'll run it out the back and zip tie it to that little frame member there, so that this filter will end up kind of sitting right about there. For any, air that has to pass through. So I'll zip tie that, and then I'll zip tie a few of these, and at that point it's just putting these panels back on and going for a test ride, and we're done. The test ride's complete. The bike seems a whole lot smoother now, so power delivery, idle, everything seems to have just kind of calmed down. I actually rode it to my dealership, had them reset the check engine light on it and remove the lean bank code that we've been dealing with. Rode all the way back. So far, no check engine light, so we're hopeful on that one. I'll update the description after I've had a chance to ride it for a few days and see if that ever comes back on. And if it does, there's other maintenance things that we can do to try to get rid of it, which I will also post on a video. So, come to the end of this project, and as always, I owe you a dad joke, and I'm going to use one that was actually given to me in the comments of a previous video. So, what did the frog say to the turtle to warn him that a car was coming? It's coming, tortoise. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. Remember, the most important part of any DIY project, just to do it. Take care.